Welcome to our talk about the last 18 months in Qudini. This is my first talk in front of a crowd this big, so this is a big first for me. This is less of a guide and more of a case study. I think we did a lot of things really well, a few things maybe less well, but the journey is always the fun part. We'll go over how the journey started and then jump ahead to the results and give it a little overview of the results, technologies we use in between. And yeah, hope you enjoy. So a little bit about us. We're an online customer experience platform specialized in queue management and booking. We are used to help a wide array of stores to better help their customers and manage their teams. And if you've ever visited any one of these stores here, you've probably interacted with our systems at some level. A little bit about me, because context matters, and I think where I was coming from when entering the company was one of the more unique aspects of this journey. I'm an iOS developer for over 7 years. I started with iOS 3.0 and Objective-C through Swift 1, 2, and 3. I joined Qudini in August 2017, and I have no prior commercial JavaScript experience at all. But because every journey is a team effort, I'll introduce my partner here, Daniel.
Hey, I'm Dan. I've been at Qudini for nearly a year now. I previously worked at Sky as a full-stack engineer. I started in 2014 and I was introduced to React.js on the web in 2015. So I joined Qudini with quite extensive knowledge of React on the web.
Cool. So you might have seen this before. Every business is unique in their product, their culture, their resources, and their customers. Qudini is very much a B2B business, and a lot of what we produce is dictated by the businesses we interact with. Saying that, a lot of what Qudini has struggled with in the past may be familiar to you. This is our front-end stack, basically. It consists of 3 pillars. The TV app, a really light front-end app that allows people to get into a queue and be displayed within a store. We have a kiosk to allow customers to be added into a queue once they enter the store. And we have a heavy queue management solution to allow the management of customers and the advisors who are managing them. As you can see, there is some fragmentation happening here. We have a lot of different technologies in play. Multiple variants of the same solution, some rewritten multiple times. Many of the kiosks, multiple times even, for different customers. And there's gaps in features everywhere, unfortunately, having to maintain so many different products. No continuous delivery or continuous integration systems set up, sadly, so it was a lot to take in, starting out. We also were quite dated visually and structurally, at least on the iOS end. The apps are built in derivations of MVC or MVP with heavy activities and heavy controllers and no real test coverage to speak of. They were also a little bit dull and inconsistent in design, and they were increasingly out of sync with what was happening on the web experience as we moved forward, which didn't really do us many favors when we went out and demoed the product to prospective buyers. So that was an issue. As well as the front-end team was quite small. It was me as the iOS developer when I joined, 1 Android developer, and 2 web developers. So not an awful lot of feet on the ground. I was the de facto leader on my platform. So we had a lot of issues, predominantly code review. So we didn't really have much code review going on across teams. Some of the teams would speak some of the languages. Some knew Java or Swift, but none really knew the domain or the platform. iOS and Android code bases kind of reflected this. Anyone who's worked on an app of any scale can see where this becomes a problem, with wildly different styles and approaches from feature to feature. We had a high level of code duplication. We would be solving the same problems every week in different ways. Some solutions could be transpiled between platforms, others were incredibly platform dependent, and in honesty, we were wasting an awful lot of time here. We had very few code owners, so when a front-end developer left, he would usually take with him all his domain-specific knowledge. As a result, we had a lot of dark areas in the applications, and when a bug happened, you were pretty much had to figure it out yourself. And feature parity was probably the biggest problem across all of our platforms. We were out of sync frequently. The web was usually ahead of most of the native platforms just by virtue of having a larger team. But the features, unfortunately, would be presented to prospective businesses as platform agnostic, which was a little bit far from the truth. I think this quote kind of applies to a lot of developers with my kind of background. And I think a lot of work was done in Qudini with this mindset in mind. It's a common cognitive bias where I suppose it's tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as a nail. Developers used the tools they were comfortable with to try and improve efficiency where they could. We did a lot of rewrites. We refactored code bases multiple times. We did common SDK libraries for Android and iOS to try and improve efficiency and code reuse. But did this actually provide value to the business? I've always believed that you should use the appropriate tool for the given problem, and I no longer believe that a native single platform approach applied in Qudini's case. So I don't really need to sell React Native to this room. As you know, it's a not so new at this stage framework that solves a lot of these problems. I'd known about it for quite a while, and I felt unlike a lot of approaches before it, PhoneGap, Cordova, Xamarin, it got the abstraction and performance just right. Qudini didn't really have a complex UI or requirements for a bespoke platform experience, so I feel even if we did it really poorly, we'd still get out a solution that was better than what we were doing at the moment. So yeah, you have a really great idea. You think it's going to do a really great job for the business. How do you convince them to use something really great? So I don't really practice hype-driven development. I wasn't going to tell them this is awesome and then walk away. I realized I had to do a lot of work to validate this assumption and get buy-in from the business. I had to really become a champion for this approach. So what did I do? I did my research. I had to read up on a lot of best practices, and it took a lot of time. I had to learn a lot of new languages and approaches I hadn't really dealt with before professionally, but I like to learn, so I gave it a shot. From everything I had learned, everything I had read, stopping at the most simple instance of React Native with vanilla JS wasn't really going to cut it at the scale we were using in our current applications. So I had to pick up a lot. ES6, React Native, TypeScript, Flux state management with Redux and Redux Observable for middleware. I watched a lot of presentations very similar to this one on how React Native had benefited very similar teams to mine in the past. So what did I do next? I talked to my team. I feel like it's hard to get backing from management if you haven't discussed the problem with your colleagues. And they might have views or perspectives that you might not have considered before. So over drinks and over lunch, I talked with my fellow developers and found that a lot of the problems that I saw, they were already aware of, and they were incredibly excited about the approach I was proposing. And they were actually really helpful at the end. So that was one of the biggest things I'd advocate. Build a slide deck. Be professional. Put some slides together highlighting all the amazing things that this platform can do and all the things that you hope it will do for your team. Very similar to this. And schedule a meeting with your manager. Formalize it. Get it on the books and go from there. Be pragmatic and honest. Don't promise the moon. Be honest that no matter where this goes and how well you do it, you will give up some level of feature development and velocity in order to make this transition. And it's a long-term investment versus a short-term cost in the business and in your development culture. And then build a prototype. You can really speak the moon, but until you actually put something out there that showcases how amazing this is, that they can see and use and feel, it's really not gonna pick up any traction, and I don't think anyone's gonna believe that you can actually execute on it. So the first step was to find a prototype that would actually showcase something we were struggling with and demo it, and something that wasn't going to take months and months to get ready. In this case, it was the TV app, which is this, which is a GIF that's on repeat at the moment. As you can see, it's probably the most simple UI you can imagine. We have customers waiting to be served on the left and customers being served in the right, and an event that basically happens periodically to move a customer from the left to the right. And this is just polling the API periodically and taking state changes into account. It's got only one screen. Doesn't even really have any animations, has maybe a minor animation at the bottom. But this is pretty much what we demoed. It took about 2 weeks to produce, and I was really happy with it. I wrapped it with React Native Web and put it in an Electron container so we could actually deploy it on web and on Windows and on Mac OS and on native iOS and Android. And it was something I truly give to the business and say, this can be deployed anywhere on whatever technology your clients are using, and this will replace pretty much all the TV app repos and do so much more. So naturally they liked it. They loved the business ended up loving what we were promising. They really saw the potential in building a more unified development team more than anything. Because culture is important and communication is important, and any way we can foster and improve that, that's awesome. So they really got behind the idea and gave me some time to build out more of their systems. The only question left was whether it would be greenfield or brownfield. I was honestly scared on the previous presentation whether he'd actually say there's no reason to do greenfield, brownfield is amazing, but as I think most of you saw, it's quite complicated once you start doing various things with it. My biggest thing was basically diluting the benefits of React Native by having, for a while, to support 3 platforms instead of just one. And I feel this question is a very personal question to the company and what they expect out of the product and how you're going to disrupt your customers in doing this transition. So in our case, the existing iOS and Android versions of the Qudini mobile app were both out of sync with web on a functionality and visual level. They didn't really have solid test coverage, and the teams didn't really enjoy interacting with them. I felt multiple native module bridges would just increase complexity in both projects, and I think the benefit would be somewhat diluted. But at the end of the day, we'd still be able to ship features, right? Thankfully, in retrospect, they kind of agreed that greenfield would be the way to go, for simplicity's sake. And iOS would effectively go into maintenance mode, and Android would continue shipping features, but at a slower pace over time. We would open hiring for new JS roles, and hopefully ramp up products quickly. And at this point, I hand you over to Daniel, who will tell you what happened next, and whether we succeeded or failed 18 months later.
Thanks, David. So David's given you an overview of how Qudini have adopted React Native. I joined Qudini later on after their adoption, and one thing which really attracted me to Qudini was the technology stack they chose, and I feel this is like a major benefit which has helped them deliver the products David has talked about. So I feel by Qudini utilizing React Native, it's really allowed them to rapidly develop the products David's talked about and get them delivered to the clients. Currently, our products are deployed globally, so we utilize internationalization quite heavily. Our products deployed in Latin America, India, in Asia, and also in Europe. So we were able to deploy our TV application within 3 months of development, giving it to our clients and learning their feedback really early. In addition to this, our kiosk was deployed a few months after. One major benefit of being able to get this technology out to the clients so early was it gave our business a lot of confidence in React Native as a technology. They saw it worked. They saw clients using it at scale. From a hiring perspective as well, it really allowed Qudini to hire. It broadened the horizon for them to hire people with different backgrounds. Myself, I came as a full stack web developer, didn't have much experience on mobile, but I was easily able to jump in and start contributing to their mobile products. So as I said, React Native was a major benefit in terms of Qudini being able to rapidly develop their applications, get them on to their clients, and then get feedback. In addition to that, TypeScript was used. I feel TypeScript was amazing. When I first joined Qudini, the fact that they were using TypeScript, the fact that they typed everything allowed me to jump around the code base and just learn it. I could learn domain objects. The ubiquitous language was used all over the place, and I easily was onboarded. In addition to that, I was able to make code changes. Like I could rename things, I could refactor stuff, and the compiler would give me early feedback if stuff broke. And this gives me confidence as an engineer that my changes are working. In addition to that, it allows you to write less tests. So I found myself writing less tests, which would assert the shape of objects, which I would prior have to do in just vanilla JavaScript. So TypeScript gives me this confidence that the shape of things are intact. And on top of that, not to forget the integration with like VS Code and other editors. So adopting React, and in addition to that, Redux has implicitly allowed us to inherit functional and functional reactive programming. And I feel these two programming paradigms have really allowed our code base to become a lot more easy to reason about. I definitely feel the learning curve is a lot higher, but when you're describing your code in a declarative format, describing what the thing should do rather than how it should do it, it makes things a lot easier to maintain. In addition to that, testing is like super easy with pure functions. Literally all we're doing is testing the inputs and outputs of things. We don't have to worry about setting up the context of the test. Side effects really get pushed to the side of your application. Continuous integration and continuous deployment. We have decided to go with Microsoft's App Center. We were originally with Bitride, but we found the offering from Microsoft was a lot more centralized. Utilizing App Center effectively gives us a lot more than just continuous integration and continuous deployment. It allows us to monitor our application in production along with getting analytics back. Our continuous integration setup actually consists of two CI cycles. We have one CI cycle which runs on Bitbucket and Bitbucket pipelines. This gives us really early immediate feedback on the TypeScript and like JavaScript context of the application. So we execute the TypeScript compiler, we execute SoloCube, our linter, along with Jest, and this gives us like really early feedback that everything within the context of TypeScript is good. Later on, App Center will then kick off. That gives us our slower feedback in terms of the platform-specific builds, which like on iOS sometimes takes up to 20 minutes. So with the hierability, by adopting React Native, like obviously our hierability has improved. And with this, we've been able to grow the capacity of our team. None of this would have been possible with the previous slide, which David demonstrated. Cool, so touching on state management, our application is super complex. We utilize Redux to manage state. We feel Redux is amazing. It centralizes our application state. It makes things super deterministic when it comes to debugging. And essentially, it's a source of truth for everything. Some really cool features you can perform with Redux is you can like serialize your entire application state and store that in like local storage, and then you can rehydrate your application. So, for example, when you do a restart, you can close down the application, restart it, and just rehydrate the state as it was previously prior to close. In addition to this, you get like time travel debugging. So the developer experience of debugging is way better, and things are way more deterministic to reason about. For handling side effects, we use Redux Observable, and with this, we implicitly inherit the RxJS library, which is incredibly powerful. We found that when it comes to implementing logic such as like debouncing and retry mechanisms, Rx gives us all of this out of the box without us having to do much. And the fact that we treat our Redux actions as a stream, as an observable stream, this allows us to utilize like the higher order functions which come out of RxJS. So if I was to ask you to write a function to poll an endpoint at an interval with retry logic, with a certain set of actions and cancel when a certain set of actions are dispatched. Like, how many lines of code do you think that is? Like, how much new code do you think you'd have to write? So we quite heavily depend on like polling logic. So, oops. So this is effectively our poll. Like this epic listens for actions of type qstart, and then we make use of the switch map, which gives you like a cancel effect. And then we invoke this function, which returns an observable, also takes in an observable, which effectively calls the endpoint. And because it's an observable, we have the ability to retry and also perform additional actions on that. And then we have the ability to take until, which will cancel the stream. Testing. So now that we've got a bigger team, we have more capacity to do really cool things like testing. We can grow the confidence in our application. We can have confidence that things work. One thing which we've adopted is the testing pyramid. I don't know if anyone's really researched into this, but effectively what the testing pyramid does is it divides up your different categories of tests into this pyramid. Things, the categories on the bottom effectively are a lot more cheaper to write and a lot faster to run, whereas things at the top are a lot more expensive to create and they're a lot more flakier. So effectively what we try to do on our code base is we try to keep the ratio of unit tests higher than end-to-end tests. In addition to that, I mentioned we use Jest. We try to use kind of like BDD style language, so we try to utilize the ubiquitous language within our tests. So you can see it's like super high level English. So we're using domain languages, domain words, and we try to structure our tests using like given, when, then. So given we have some context, when we execute an action, then we expect this result. And as you see, this is testing a reducer, so this is a pure function. All it is inputs and outputs. There's no more like crazy side effect-y stuff we have to set up. Cool, so happy goodbyes. So we have no more hard dependencies on different platforms. This has enabled engineers who have experience with JavaScript to jump on board and start contributing. In addition to that, they can start contributing towards our code reviews. So we get, instead of just having one developer on like iOS who has an expertise in Objective-C or Swift, we're now getting more engineers contributing back to pull requests into our code base, effectively making them more healthy. So with this larger pool of engineers, we can obviously jump on to doing more cool things such as testing, implementing analytics, which is something we've recently done with Segment and Mixpanel. So this is kind of our technology stack now. It's a lot more consolidated. You can see the TV app and the kiosk both make use of React Native. They also use React Native Web. The queue management product consists of a web application and a mobile application. On the web application, it uses a hybrid approach of Angular and React, in addition to the mobile application using just React. So I showed you what the team looked like before, so this is what we look like now. So we're 8 developers who can all contribute to this product. So what it's also allowed to do is it's allowed us to structure our teams to be more product and feature focused, as opposed to just being a team specializing in a certain platform. Ultimately, our team really love working with React Native and the associated technologies. The experience has improved in terms of implementing features. Getting features out of the box, such as hot module replacement, is like amazing. Time travel debugging, as I mentioned before. Cool, so I'm going to attempt to give you a demo of the application which we've literally just released today. I have to do a kind of transition over onto the iPad, so hopefully that doesn't go too bad. Okay, cool. So this is Qudini. So effectively what this product does is it will get deployed into stores around the world who deal with customers. Those stores will consist of a concierge and possibly an advisor who are there to greet their customers. The advisors and the concierge will be using this application. So you can see we're currently on the login screen. So we've got kind of like an overview of what capabilities the product has. We've got like a remember me option, which makes use of Redux persist. So it's like super easy to like store that state in local storage. So this is effectively the queue screen. The concierge or advisor can make use of this screen when customers are coming into their store. So as a customer comes into their store, they can either add a customer to a queue or they can create a booking. So for example, if I create a booking, they're presented with a list of products. I can then go ahead and select a product and book this customer in for a booking. So if I look tomorrow in the afternoon, I can select a booking slot and then the advisor I want to assign them to. I think I've just become unavailable, so I'm going to assign them to someone else. And so now I'm presented with a form, so I can input some customer data and then go ahead and add them. So all of the navigation you're seeing here is utilizing React navigation. So we decided to go with a platform agnostic navigation library. We were previously using a library from Wix, but we found that it had too many kind of platform inconsistencies. So effectively the queue screen, you're presented with the queue on the left. You can select a customer, and this will give you a more detailed view in regards to the service you're offering them. You can view the profile about them. You can modify their details. And then you can go ahead and perform like another action on them, such as serving. Okay, so another screen we've got is, so we've got the queue screen, which is kind of like what's happening right now in your store. In addition to that, you can go ahead and view like history. So you can take a look at customers who have previously been served. You can view details about them. You can go ahead and perform actions such as creating another booking for them or assigning them to another queue. So yeah, this is effectively it. We've been like working really hard to stabilize the application and get it ready for release. Today we've managed to get to that point. Hopefully it's a good demonstration.
Back to the slides.
Okay, so I've gone over like what worked for us. Now I'm gonna do the contrast. So what didn't work? So this thing, use it, turn it on, no implicit any. We didn't turn this on, and this really slowed us down. It led to a lot of gaps within our code base, and just ultimately it's hard for yourself to reason about what things are when the compiler is implicitly inferring things as any. Because I mentioned TypeScript is effectively living documentation of your code base, this is super important. Shipping. We found it really hard to ship the application. We should have done this really early so we get early client feedback. Because we didn't do this, we left it for quite an amount of time, sent it to our clients, they came back to us and said, this has to change, this has to change. In addition to that, growing our team would have helped and we would have been able to ship harder, which obviously ultimately leads to the fact that hiring is hard. We find that the functional and functional reactive programming paradigms obviously have a high learning curve, so it's hard for people to adopt these skills. On that note, we are hiring. We are using React Native at scale, and we're solving really cool problems. If you're interested in working for us, please send your CV to qudini@jobs.workable.mail.com. You can also visit our whiteboard to see the other job roles available. Thank you.